So you've all got your spot, have you? It's where I start making Sheldon Cooper jokes. That's a very, that will only make sense to a very small group of people who watch The Big Bang Theory. Clearly nobody in the room. You're on my spot. All right. So how is your spot today? It's always lovely for us coming to teach in this space because you might be able to feel it through the floor, but there's a lot of bodies have lain on this floor, right? And had their varying hundreds, yes. This had these myriad of experiences, including this experience you're probably having that the floor is getting softer. Maybe. Yeah. I think this is that experience, if it happens for you, that the floor can feel more soft, can feel more accommodating, is one of these really tacit examples of the way we can shape our perception. That our perception is not something that's fixed. It's something that is constantly evolving and developing in line with, you know, the way the changes that we can make in the way we sense and the way our worldview can change. So if your worldview of the floor and its qualities is changing, that's a real celebration. It means that this illusion that our perceptions are somehow fixed is shifting for you in that very somatic way. Okay, so again, reflect back on the state of you yesterday morning. And again, I'm asking you to tax your memory. Oh, there's some, Jen, there's just that someone's trying to get in the door. Oh, they're going around the other door. And how are you today? What's the state of being today compared to yesterday morning? And what are your metrics for that? So what are the things that you kind of earmarked yesterday to measure, as it were? The lightness or the heaviness of one leg versus the other, the turned outness, the height or the length of the arch of your lumbar spine, the pressure of the right versus left side of your head, all of those different things, the length of your arms, position of your hands. What yesterday excited your curiosity that you were tracking, and how is that today? So what I'll do in this segment is give you little side comments about why I'm teaching what I'm teaching. So we're now having this sort of side conversation as peer ATM teachers. And I'll try and make that clear when I say that so that you know what I'm saying is not what I would do for the public. So I would not necessarily use that kind of iterative scan with the public. Because often, you know, that's pragmatic, isn't it? They're often only coming once a week. So you're requiring them to remember a lot of detail from one week to the next. Now, with a class that you know well, you may very well do that. But you can see I'm doing that for a purpose here because we're training you to actually do the work. And for you to do the work, you really need this sharp kinesthetic memory for yourself and for working with your clients. So this scan is not a traditional, useful kind of public scan. Okay. Please roll over onto your stomach. Notice how you roll, which direction. Louder. Sorry? I need it to be louder. Oh, okay. Sorry. More in the middle of the set. Right. I've got quite a high collar today. Is that better? Is that better? Up the back? No? Kylie's shaking her head. A little bit...
we need more volume.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more volume. What about Ruth up the other side? Is it loud up the back, Ruth? It's okay. So it's a little bit more? Okay. Sorry? It's been better in the past. Try that. Yes, yeah. That's slightly echoey, but lacking sibilance. I could add sibilance. Sibilance. Oh, like those little turkeys. I've been seeing the ads for. I didn't know there's a spelling bee competition.
Feldenkrais was the word that was included in the winning team.
Really?
Yeah. Spell Feldenkrais.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Fran's just telling me in that spelling bee competition, Feldenkrais was in the winning segment. That's sneaky. Wow. Okay.
Because it's old.
And they got it.
It's
Goodness gracious. Okay, so you're lying on your back, on your stomach. And now you've got something different to scan, right? You've got the front of you that's getting all of this tactile feedback from the floor. And your hands are somewhere near your head, both hands. And notice which direction you've got your face pointing. So we'll just do a little scan. I'm just going to walk around the room. Some people got their face in the middle. That's sneaky. So this is Feldenkrais practitioners putting their face in the middle. If you had to turn your face one way, which way would be your comfortable way? And how do you know? So take some time to work out, have you really made this sort of best decision? What is it about facing the right or the left? And how do you know? The only way to know is to try it, right? And this is the sort of quintessential Feldenkrais process, isn't it? So the old way would be, I've got my habit, I always turn my head to the left, and you never revisit that habit, that decision. And Feldenkrais, that's what we do. We expose the habit and we revisit it and we probe it to see, is it really the best decision? Why did I make that decision whenever I made that decision? For what reasons? And are those reasons still valid? So you can answer that question for yourself. This is the experiment. And those of you who've got an aversion to science, ha ha ha, you are all little scientists. And tomorrow you'll all be little artists. Okay, so if you're satisfied now that you understand a little bit more about your habit, could everybody please turn their head to the right? And could you find a way that it is tolerably comfortable? It might not be your comfortable, but it is somewhat comfortable. Maybe there's something that you can do slightly to adjust the height of one shoulder off the floor to help make it comfortable. Maybe you can try lengthening one leg or the other to make it a little bit more comfortable. And now your right hand is somewhere near in the vicinity of your right face, not close, but sort of in that field. We're going to refine that movement from yesterday. So as you lie there, so your hands hopefully are palm down. It would be a stretch to not have them palm down. With your right hand, would you slowly lift your wrist a little so that you, as if you're going to stand on your fingers. So your forearm lifts, you lift your hand, but your fingers still stay down so that you can kind of, it's by this sort of gentle lifting of the forearm that your fingers are drawn up and they can stand like on their tips. And you draw it so high enough that the shape of your hand, so the inside of your hand is like the shape of a bell. Just keep doing that a few times. And maybe to have the shape of the bell, some of the fingers might leave, so the little finger is a little shorter, depending on the length of your fingers. And from that position, if you keep on lifting your hand very softly and gently so that the fingers leave the floor and your fingers are free to drop, as your wrist extends, so as it goes backwards, so you're straightening your wrist and then going beyond straight, notice that very gently your fingers come together. And then as you drop your wrist down again, your fingers go apart, they're straight, and they touch the floor and make that bell shape. And then they draw up. I'll say it again. So you lift your forearm and your whole hand is hanging down and your fingers are kind of standing, right? And the space between the space within the palm of your hand and your fingers is shaped like a bell, in as much as it's kind of the dome of the bell is the palm of your hand. And your fingers are sort of splayed out like the base of the bell. So it's still on the floor. Now, as you keep lifting now from the wrist, so the wrist cocks back, then the pads of the fingers come together, they close like they did yesterday, and you get this kind of undulating movement. So the hand starts out relatively open. You lift the forearm a bit and the fingers get dragged up onto their tips. And then you keep lifting the wrist and the fingers close. And then you reverse the movement and lower and the hand splays out again. There's almost a sense of octopus in here. So this is what's known in Feldenkrais as the bell hand. So the other way that Feldenkrais describes it is that if you were going to pull your nose and you would put your fingers around your nose in a sort of circle, and as you're going to, then you bring your fingers together to pull the tip of your nose, and the pulling would be the extension of your wrist. Maybe even try that. Pull your nose with all 5 digits. And then you keep doing this repetitively. And we'll keep coming back to this. So notice if you're getting a little bit nervous because it's so precise, my instructions are so precise. And are you going into the space of getting it right? So you've read the chapter, Awareness Through Movement, and his views about having a sense of right. And the main thing is to get this feeling now that there is this connection. So it's the same movement as yesterday where the pads of the fingers and the thumb come together. What we've added is the movement of the wrist. The elbow can stay relatively quiet on the floor. But obviously there's something happening in the shoulder, right? And then let your hand fall back down and open. That's it. And there's this sort of sense of, I often think it's like a jellyfish swimming through the sea, like hypnotizing somebody. So however you're doing it, be satisfied with that and now think about the quality of that. And could it be somehow have this simplicity that is a hallmark of elegance, right? And that it's small enough and clear enough that it can be repetitive. And again, notice the emotional tonus in you, you know, this achievement orientation if you have it, or that you get bored. Some people get bored when we go into detail. Is that your experience? Or you have a frustration relative to getting it right. Just notice those things, let them go. They're just all interesting information. And leave it and just rest. Rest. You need to turn your head, because this is not your preferred way, do that. And let your hand rest. And check in that you haven't been overdoing it. And you'll know that because you'll feel a little tweakiness in the forearm muscles. And make a note to yourself, okay, I do less. Do slower, smaller. Okay, now start again with your head to the right and the right hand quietly, gently doing this bell movement, which we'll now call the bell movement, so I don't have to keep saying the detail, which is this quiet bringing together of the, excuse me, bringing together of the pads of the finger and the thumb with this movement of the wrist, this quiet, undulating, almost stroking kind of movement. And based on the feedback that you got from your system, as it were, you've modified the rate or the amount of movement so that it's sustainable. And now could you quietly imagine bending your right knee up a little so that it slides up on the floor nearer to your stomach? And could you do that slide? Could you embark on that slide in a way that does not interfere with the movement of the hand? And now go even slower and smaller, so when the foot goes back down, and start examining for yourself, what was the preparation? What was the very first impulse in your system to initiate this movement? Was there a tightening somewhere, a pushing somewhere, a bracing somewhere? Was it necessary? Maybe it was for you at this point. But be clear. What Feldenkrais is really, I thought he articulated beautifully in this chapter, was that our awareness, the awareness that we're training is not simply the knowing, it's the knowledge. It's not simply just observing something. There is a knowledge to this, an understanding that comes out of our awareness. So what is your understanding of the way you initiate drawing your leg up? And not in terms of the name of the muscles or the joints, but the experience in a somatic language, if you like. And the next time the leg's up, leave it up for a while. And if your left hand is still above your head, keep going with the bell movements in the right hand and take your left hand down by your side. And how do you do that? How can you relieve some of the weight of that left arm in order to slide it down without interfering with the bell movement of the right hand? And do that a few more times to be really clear. Again, the same idea. What initiates the movement? Is it necessary? Next time your hand is down by side, leave it there. So be resting on the back of the hand. And the right hand is still quietly opening and closing. And now take the right hand itself and place it so that your fingers are splayed on the section of your head between your forehead and your right ear, so where there's some hair. So your palm and your fingers are touching that part of your head that's kind of exposed, as it were. And in this position, start drawing your fingers together as if you're going to pull your hair. So they're splayed out around. Your hand is quite open and they're splayed out around. And now you're going to move your forearm in that way that pulls your hand back so that your fingers come together and you actually make that bell configuration on your head. And if you keep going, your fingers lift off and they'll kind of pull your hair. So you start off with the palm of your hand, the whole palmar surface of your hand resting on your head. And that drawing of your hand slides your fingers towards each other along your skull. And then when they lift off your skull, they'll kind of catch up with a bit of your hair and pull. And can you keep breathing? So now, because it's you doing it, has that given you a softer quality to your hand? Because you don't want to actually pull your hair? Has that given you more information about how soft this movement could be? Just bring your hand a little bit more around towards the right ear so that it is really not on the front of your head, it's on the side of your head, more around the temple. And could you imagine that if you really did take purchase on your hair and pulled, that it could almost lift your head, but perhaps don't? And there's a funny quality to this movement in that the fingers actually don't ever really curl. It's another little refinement, is that the fingers actually stay relatively straight. They bend at the big knuckle. They don't bend at the middle and end knuckles. Particularly, it's not, they don't get held rigid either. But there's this sense that we're using more those lumbrical muscles, the ones that make the sort of the shape of the hand that, holds a pack of cards, for example. Now just keep doing that and quietly roll onto your back, but keep pulling your hair. How could that be? And if that was satisfactory, you can just stay on your back, but you may want to go back and explore little bits. Was there a grunt in there somewhere, a little mini grunt where you had to push off, a little bit of effort? You know, any of those little signs that maybe there is something to be learned. And that gently you're pulling your hair, touching, you can think of it as stroking with the right hand as you find your way onto your back. Feldenkrais at this point says, even if it takes 3 minutes to get onto your back. So that's clearly his threshold, 3 minutes. Like boiling an egg. And breathing. You might have a little sense of, it reminds me watching you, you know, when little children twirl their hair and they can do anything and twirl their hair at the same time. It's just kind of their comfort. Could you have that sense that this is like your little comfort movement? And therefore you can do it while you do anything else. Good, and when you're satisfied and you've had your 3 minutes and you're lying on your back, bring your arms down by your side. And sense for yourself, to your own satisfaction, any influence that this refined bell hand movement has had on your state of being. Gently, slowly roll your head a little bit left and a little bit right. See if there's any difference. Now, we didn't set this up as a reference movement earlier, but you've done this many times. How is it for you today? And we'll pose a question. When you roll your head to the right, is it the same kind of orientation? And one way you can check this is when you roll your head to the right, does the chin stay relatively the same distance, for example, from the clavicle, or does it tuck more in towards the clavicle when it rolls to the right or to the left? Can you tell? And as you know, these questions are somewhat rhetorical. If you can't tell, that's fine. And that's interesting for you, right? If you can't tell, that's interesting. That's like finding the empty car park in the parking lot. It's empty. It's there to be explored. Yes, it's got that, yes, I found an empty car park feeling. It's good. Something I don't know. That's marvellous. Whereas again, in our culture, when we find out something we don't know, we often try and cover it up. Oh, well, I did know that, or it's not important, or well, I just can't remember it, or, you know, we try and hide our gaps or fudge over them. In this room, you have the privilege of celebrating your gaps. Leave it rest quietly for a moment again. Now lying on your back, could you start the bell movement? So some people have their hands at palm upwards, so you can do it with your palm upward. Other people have got their hands palm down, so then your fingers will drag on the floor. Whereas if you've got your hand lying on the little finger side, then you'll be doing it in space as well. So it might be easier or harder or just different depending on how your hand is, but try and get that feeling of closing your fingers, the pads coming towards the thumb with this kind of movement of the wrist. It gives this jelly-like wave. It's kind of pulsing, gentle, sustainable movement. And keep that movement going quietly, slowly. Let's say you can have 3 minutes as well. Roll onto your stomach. And with this requirement for your hand to keep up with the bell movement, it kind of takes the right hand out of the picture. But does it mean that you have to stiffen anywhere? Can it still kind of float with this sort of seaweed-like quality? So you don't have to stiffen in order to not use your right hand. There's a part where you stiffen. Just go back and explore that. When you find yourself somewhat to your satisfaction on your stomach, stay there. Your head turned to the right and your hand continuing to make this gentle, sustainable movement on the floor somewhere in the vicinity of your face. And rest there in some comfort. Find a way of being comfortable on your stomach. And the hand is continuing the bell movement. And now think, as well as you can, how you could get up to standing from this position on your tummy with the bell hand continuing to move. And at this point, Feldenkrais gives you a clue, is that could you activate all your flexors in a way that's not dissimilar to the way you're bringing your fingers together, that would make you flex up on your tummy and then help you to stand. Otherwise, you do it however you like. It's as best you can, actually, is his phrase. But there's this idea that you could curl up and then straighten. So there's a million ways. This is a free range kind of creative. And once you're standing, your hand continues to create the bell-shaped movement. So that's really demanding, right? That's not easy. But take the time to simply quietly stand with your hands in this gentle, undulating, opening and closing, anemone kind of movement. And as you do that, think through all your body parts, as it were. So the main ones: feet, lower legs, knees, thighs, hips, pelvis, spine, chest, shoulders, arms, etc., neck, head. And can you keep those all in your mind's eye, as it were, and slowly, slowly fold yourself back down to lying on your stomach without losing any of those, the whole of you, the ensemble, and that the hand can gently, quietly flex and extend. And your hand continues to open and close gently. Roll onto your back. Is that a little easier, having done something much harder? It looked really elegant, actually. They looked really light. I don't know if you can feel that well. You feel what you feel. Don't let us tell you what we saw. Could almost imagine that your cat or your dog would really appreciate you developing this quality of softness in your right hand. I think hairdressers should do this. Wouldn't they? Nice. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Quietly, gently scan as you are. So can you scan as you're doing the movement? Your whole self. So this dividing your attention gently and quietly between the maintenance of the soft, gentle movement of the hand and this kind of checklist that the whole of you is there and accounted for. How are you lying on the floor? The sense that your hand is just light, levitating, can float up. And now for the last time, slowly come up to standing. This time it's from your back. And again, stand quietly. And the hand continues to pulse. And there's a sense of your body folding and unfolding, just like the hand. And you're breathing. And now you're dividing your attention between your own internal state and the world around you and your hand making this movement, and start to walk around the room. And if you've got enough attention spare, you can bring other people into your awareness. And is there a part of the walking cycle that feels a little bit like when your fingers are closing together, and a part of the walking cycle when it feels a little bit like your fingers opening out? Do you time your hand in a particular way with the rhythm of your steps or the rhythm of your breathing? Or is that just adding one more detail that it's going to make your brain explode? And would your brain explode when your fingers were opening or when your fingers were closing? What happens if you speed up your walking? What happens if you walk backwards? Good, and go back to your mat and lie down, have a full rest, everything quiet, everything still. And how do you experience this stillness now? Everything's come to rest completely. Is there still this kind of echo of the movement? Can you sense the ghost of the movement in your right hand and its influence? How far is the influence, if you can feel it? Is it up to the elbow, up to the shoulder? Is it the shoulder girdle? Is it the whole right side? The side of your face on the right? And once more, roll your head a little bit left and a little bit right. Just to check in how that is for you, given the sort of 80-20 rule, which in this instance might be the 50-50 rule. Wouldn't like to predict. Which way do you go that brings your chin closer towards your chest compared to the other way, or is it equal both ways? Leave it. Rest for a moment. And tune into your breathing. And could your breathing even have this overlay, this conceit of being slightly, process of opening and closing? And now, somehow or other, become aware of the people around you and look around and make eye contact with someone who's going to be your confederate for the next half hour. And then without necessarily negotiating verbally, one of you will stay lying and the other one will come to sit next to you. So engage in this opening and closing of a social connection.